Liberals, when they're not trying to kill unborn babies, they're trying to sell them like property. All right, I'm overstating it just a little bit, but things are getting wacky in California when it comes to babies. And we got to bring in our friend Emma Waters, research associate at the Center for Life, Religion, and Family over at Heritage Foundation. Yes, I know I'm overstating it a bit, but there is something about this whole movement to look at babies as some sort of a commodity, right?
That's precisely right. So, the bill in California that you're referencing would redefine infertility to mean that a same sex couple or a single person would qualify as infertile. Even though they're biologically able to have kids, they're just, not to be crass, doing it wrong. And what this bill would do is it would require insurance companies in California to cover in vitro fertilization costs for these persons. And basically,
Yeah.
the bill says that if you identify as infertile, whatever that means to you, you can have these services covered, which is a key part in people creating children, especially if they're not biologically able to do so.
Right. That people have to understand that in this context, with the same sex couple, specifically two men, the idea of being infertile and you need infertility services, that means a surrogate. Basically, you are now creating a huge, huge demand on that market for surrogate pregnancy. A baby is now a commodity.
Yeah, that's precisely right. And what's important to note here is once a man has to purchase the egg in order to create the baby, pay for the in vitro fertilization services to create the baby in a lab, then rent the womb of a woman to bear and birth the child, and then, of course,
Oh,
pay for all the legal fees involved, the line between a legitimate fertility service and outright baby selling dissolves. Because what you're seeing here is there's not much of a difference, perhaps, between a man who is paying for all the parts of a baby to be birthed in order to take it from its mother, and a man who just goes up to a woman on the street and pays for her baby. And what's so outrageous about this is that we outright ban baby selling, of course. We outright ban the selling of human persons, but even when it comes to the composite levels, buying organs is explicitly illegal. And yet, when it comes to gametes or even embryos, there's a whole market for this that enables it to happen that we really don't see anywhere across the medical field outside of this one particular area.
we also ban prostitution. You can't sell your body for providing pleasure to someone, but you can sell your body to procreate. Morally, this is so unbelievably confused. And let's just be clear here: where are the women in this equation? They're the ones who will be exploited here. And it redefines infertility to mean two men who can't have a baby. Well, of course, two men can't have a baby. Those men can be as fertile as anyone, as Al Pacino, but they're still never going to make a baby. That's not what infertility means.
Yeah, that's precisely right. And this entire push to redefine infertility and require insurance companies to provide in vitro fertilization stems from a group called Men Having Babies, which is a pro LGBTQ, pro surrogacy organization that's explicitly devoted to helping gay men in relationships have children. And these are children that maybe one of them is biologically related to, but that child is certainly not coming from the two of them because they do need a woman, like you said. So this organization is trying to ensure that gay men face as few legal, medical, and social barriers to creating kids or really building kids just because they want them. But this completely overlooks what's good for the children who were involved, right? Because this means that we are stripping those children of the chance to be raised by a mother who conceived them and bore them. We're taking that child away from the only woman that they've ever known, the surrogate who carried them. We're exploiting the wombs of women because oftentimes you see that altruistic surrogacy or surrogacy for free is often legal. But it turns out a lot of women don't actually want to do that, even when their medical fees are covered. But then the moment you put a price tag on commercial surrogacy, women who it seems need the money really badly, which is where the exploitation comes in, all of a sudden are inclined to become surrogates, which just gets
Right.
really messy.
By the way, for two women who are in a same sex relationship, they're also technically infertile as well, but it's not quite as complicated for them, right? All they need to do is make a withdrawal at a sperm bank, I guess, to be crass, and then their problem is solved.
That's precisely right. So in some instances, they still choose to use a surrogate, but primarily they would just have to purchase the sperm, and then the insurance company, if this bill passed, would be required to cover the in vitro fertilization, and they would implant it in one or both of the women, depending on the situation. But still, the
Hmm.
child here is being deprived of the chance to know their father, and I think we're all familiar with the stats that show just how important fathers are for the development of their children, and just how bad things get when it comes to crime, when it comes to their educational outcomes, and even their financial stability when fathers are deprived from the picture of a child's life.
Well, and it does seem like this entire equation doesn't really take what's best for the baby or the child into account. This is really just about the desires of the two men in this relationship, or I guess theoretically, the two women are in the relationship. It's really about their desires to have a baby, not what's actually best for the kid.
Right, which is morally irresponsible at the finest. Adults have the responsibility and the duty to do what is best for children who are vulnerable and rely on them to care for them in these moments. And yet, like you're saying, these sorts of bills completely remove the question of what's good for children. If you go through the entire bill, if you go through the sponsors' comments, and even men having babies, not once can you find them take into account what is good for the children. They simply don't mention the child, because for them, the child is an accessory or a product they can order and customize based on their own desire. The child is secondary in this equation, and yet this is the creation of human life we're talking about, and it should be prioritized above all else.
By the way, I mean, listen, I don't think that it's best for the children, but if a same-sex couple wants to go through this process with their own money, God bless them. I prefer they adopt, but if this is what they're going to do, they're going to do. But with this new bill, this would compel California taxpayers to subsidize the entire operation, even if it's against their deeply held religious beliefs.
Right. Private insurance holders in California would be required to cover in vitro fertilization services for anyone who identifies as such. And what's so interesting is Illinois was actually the first state to redefine infertility along these lines and require insurance companies to cover in vitro fertilization. And this bill just went into effect in January of 22, also lobbied by the same Men Having Babies organization. And so they currently have bills in New York and in Minnesota, as well as this bill in California, trying to pass this and get it through, not to mention bills that they've introduced on the federal level. And so far, Illinois is the only bill that's passed, but we're starting to see a radical shift in how we think about the nature of fertility, of conception, and really what it means to be a human in this very real sense. Because if children are no longer something that are usually conceived or adopted between two couples, then we're looking at, yeah, a completely different
Yeah.
world here, where all of a sudden children are just made in labs, frankly, by the order of men, women, same sex, or in heterosexual relationships.
Yeah. Oh, it's a brave new world is what we're looking at. And maybe it's me, but you've got same-sex couples who want to have a baby. Okay. Yeah, you've got women who are willing for money to actually be impregnated and give birth to that baby. Meanwhile, we also have women who are still going to abortion clinics, certainly in California, at any point in gestation and killing that unborn baby. Can't we sort of work together and make this happen? Instead of killing the baby, how about that woman who is pregnant give birth and put the baby up for adoption and encourage the same sex couple to adopt that baby? It seems like we could solve a lot of problems with this.
You know, Larry, but if we did that, the adults wouldn't have the chance to dictate the hair color, the eye color, the skin color, or even the sex of the baby. And 87% of IVF clinics offer those services. So if this was
Oh,
simply about what was good for kids, I think we would see a shift in that direction. But what we're looking at here is not only kids for order, but kids who are customizable based on our advancements in genetic technology when it comes to IVF.
this is really out of a science fiction movie. Is this bill going to make its way? Is it going to pass in California? I'm assuming they have a one party rule in that state.
So the one thing that we do have in our favor is that the insurance companies are adamantly opposed to this, because this is going to be a very expensive bill for them. And they're looking at, I think, statewide, a $330 million increase. So, for example, a single round of IVF, so an attempt to create an embryo, can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000. And before most couples are successfully pregnant, it usually takes about 3 to 4 rounds. So you're looking at insurance companies paying high margins out to these doctors who were conducting these services, and they are opposed. So the bill is currently in the California Assembly Health Committee, where we're waiting for the hearing date to be debated. And so you'll have many social conservatives and insurance companies who are fighting against it. But really, anyone knows at this point what the future holds.
Emma Waters, Heritage Foundation, thanks for explaining it all to us, and I'm terrified. More to come on O'Connor Tonight.